Hey, good morning, guys. Welcome to Drivetime. This week we have Pastor Josh Lany joining us. He's currently the children's pastor at Cape Christian. He's been at Cape Christian for just under a year, and if you don't have young kids at church, you may not know Pastor Josh. So this is going to be a great opportunity for you to hear from him, hear his heart, and he's got something great for us today.
Hey, what's going on, Dave? And good morning, gentlemen. Glad to be here for Drive Time. First of all, I just want to say thanks for the invite. Glad to be here. Super blessed, super honored to be a part of this. When Dave reached out to me a week or so ago, I was like, hey, man, would you like to do a Drive Time with us? I was like, absolutely. Like he said, I've been here for just under a year, part of Cape Christian, and lived here just a little bit longer than that. So any opportunity I get to make connections, meet new guys, hang out with guys, just build some brotherhood and some friendships, I'm all about it. So I'm glad to be here today. And with that being said, I'm ready to jump right into it. The thing I kind of wanted to talk about this morning was the idea, the concept of time, and just the different things that eat away at our time and the things that we really should be investing our time in. You know, it's no secret that we live in the most wired and chaotic and burnt out time in history. And the crazy part is that it's constantly increasing. So many things are pulling at us from all different directions, whether it's just having to pay the bills or something trying to drain us of our resources. At the end of the day, we are draining the tank quicker than we can fill it right now. And the most part, it leaves us tired and worn out and stressed and all kinds of stuff. So I want to kind of speak into that today and hopefully give everyone a couple of tools as to how to kind of alleviate some of that pressure. Because to me, the most valuable resource we have, and the one that every single one of us has the same amount of every single day, is time. We all have 24 hours in every single day. And I'll never forget, man, I was about 20 or 21 years old. This is just a few years ago. And I was working for a church in St. Louis, and we were planting a church in West Palm Beach, Florida, and they were looking for a children's pastor. And I was already one of the children's pastors in St. Louis, and so in my mind, I thought, you know what better opportunity for a young guy like me and go start like my life, basically my adult life. I could move to South Florida because that's something I've always wanted to do, and I'm glad that worked out. So I wanted to move to South Florida and live in South Florida near the beach and sunshine and no snow. So I went and told my boss and went through the whole process, interviewed, applied, all that good stuff. And I was definitely one of the top candidates considered because I already worked there. It was just a matter of relocating. So we kind of decided it would have been a good idea for me to go down there, establish the heart, the vision of the church in the children's ministry, carry that through, build a great team, focus down there. And I would have been, that would have been my job. That was, where the direction was going. And so I kind of settled that in my head and in my heart, and I was ready to do it. And I was looking into apartments and all kinds of stuff in the area. And after we kind of talked about it, I sat and I was spending time with God, and I was thinking, I was praying about it, and something just didn't feel right. Something didn't settle well in my heart and in my spirit, and I was just unsettled about it. So I went to one of the smartest guys I know, went to my dad, and, I basically was just running this through him. We were standing in his garage, and I'll never forget that night because we were by the tool bench and just kind of talking, just kind of running through scenarios of, things he was doing at my age and what would have been his thought process. And I'm kind of running this idea past him. I landed in this place where I was like, you know what? I don't think I could fully commit to moving down there. I don't think this is what God has for me right now. But since we've already kind of established the conversation, we've already kind of had some ideas in mind, I would commit to doing at least 6 months. I'd go down there and, establish the vision, the culture, bring our church heart down there. But at the end of that 6 months, I was turning around, I was coming home. That was what I kind of decided in my mind. And I'll just never forget it, man. It was a colder night, and so my dad looked at me and he was like, you could do that. It wouldn't be a bad idea. It would be honoring a commitment that you made. He's like, if I have any advice, it's this, is that time is the only resource that you cannot get more of once you spent it. And that really stuck with me that night, and I wrestled with that for about a day or so. And I went back to work, and I talked to my boss, and I was like, hey, man, I know we need a children's pastor in Florida, and I know we kind of talked about that being me, but something doesn't settle right, something doesn't feel right about it. I don't feel like this is what God has for me right now. I think it'd be best if I stay here. I know we talked about this, so I'd be willing to offer 6 months of my time. I'll go down there and help us find a children's pastor and all that good stuff. And so it was a good thing that I did that because he took that to the higher ups at the church and they talked it through, and I ended up not being sent down there. It was a good thing I went and talked to him the day I did, because they were about 1 or 2 days away from telling me, hey man, time to pack your bags. You're going to Florida. But thank God none of that happened. It didn't work out that way for good reason, because that was about September of 2016. And I met and started dating my wife in November of that year. So just a couple months apart. Had I been living in Florida at the time, that probably would have never happened, or at least it would have happened much later. So I'm thankful that I listened to my dad's advice and was wise with my time. But that will always stick with me, and I'll never forget it. And that's really just the tagline, the sentence. The thing I want to think about as I kind of talk our way through this for this morning is, time is the only resource that you can't get more of once you spend it, because our time is so invaluable. There are so many things eating away and demanding at our time. Think about this. I was reading the other day, some 5 quillion bytes of data are created or made every single day. I don't even know how many zeros that is. That goes beyond my bandwidth of numbers. But 5 quintillion bytes of data are created every single day, which means that every 2 days we develop as much information as we did between the dawn of civilization and 2003. 0.5 of that amount, 0.5 of that amount is only ever analyzed or used, which means 50% of that goes to waste. So it's wasteful information. And it really means that the actual amount of data that we consume in one day would have been the same as one person's entire lifetime worth from 1574, which is really not that long ago, all things considered. I say all that to say this. Just to put it simply, we are basically right now, this day and age, we are data junkies living in a data junkyard. The more we consume information and the more we keep our faces in front of the water hose of the internet, the more we lose the very skill needed to say no to it in the first place. And that's not to say that all tech and internet and connection is bad, because a lot of good comes from our connectedness. Stuff like this happens on a regular basis. We can share the gospel and to kids and adults and families all over the world through the power of technology. And it's fantastic. I mean, I love it personally. But there's something to be said about taking time to step back, slow down, and disconnect for a little bit. I want to read you this from Luke chapter 5, verse 15 and 16. It says this: "But despite Jesus' instructions, the report of his power had spread faster, and vast crowds came to hear him preach and to be healed of their diseases." Verse 16, and the most powerful verse of these two, it says, "But Jesus often withdrew to the wilderness for prayer." Often. It's crazy for me to see even the Son of God pull away, take time in his day to step away from everything and to spend time with God, even just to invest that time into himself, into his ministry, into his friends around him. It's so interesting to me because where that verse is written in Luke chapter 5 is right after he heals a man with leprosy and just before he goes to prepare another healing. So right between these two miracles, it's very clearly said that Jesus takes time to step aside and rest and slow down. Even the Son of God does this. And the reason this is so important to me, the reason this is so crazy, is that even when the crowds were pressing him and this word was spreading so fast, 2,000 years ago, when data access was so limited, Jesus understood the importance of taking time away from the crowds to go off by himself and to pray and seek God before moving on. Even the Son of God knew he needed to slow down his life and get away and pray. So my question is simply this: what are the things that are consuming so much of our time, energy, and attention that we lose sight of what's actually important? Things as simple as taking 1 hour a day to spend time with God. And I know that sounds super big, 1 hour a day. Where am I going to find 1 hour? I always say to people, an hour of prayer is like an hour of working out. If for some reason you can't go to the gym for an hour, it doesn't kill you to do it for 10 minutes. And it's the same thing. Like, even though you can't do it for the full hour, 10 minutes is still going to fuel you for a little bit of the day. So an hour of prayer a day to spend time with God. Playing board games or going out into the yard to play catch with our kids is something that we don't do nearly as often anymore. Spending time with our wives, even if it's just an at-home movie night or working out and taking care of our physical health, or even just sleep. Like, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I just need to slow down, disconnect, and rest. And for me, this is one of the most difficult things because I love information. Like, I'm that kind of person. I like fun facts because the word in that little phrase to me is fun. I find facts fun. Knowing trivial things that actually don't matter to anything in my life, I enjoy it. And I think it's interesting. But it occupies space in my brain where I could be focusing on the things that are actually important. So with that, I just want to wrap up with this kind of thought right here. My challenge to all of us, and this includes me, is just 3 simple things. 1, what are the things in our life that are, 1, too fast-paced and need to slow down? 2, what are some things or habits that we need to cut from our life because they occupy too much space in our time? And 3, and finally, what habits or things should we be investing our time in? Like our families, serving with kids ministry, that's a shameless plug, making church a priority, spending time with God. I mean, you fill in the blank. You know what's important to your life. You know what you should be investing your time in. And I really think the more we get a hold of this, the more we wrap our hearts and our minds around it, we can really make a great impact in not only our world, but in our local community and the people around us when we choose to invest our time wisely.
That's awesome. I got to tell you, sitting here listening to you talk about it, it puts it into a different perspective for me. That the idea of time as a resource, as a finite item that we can't go to the store and get more of, and just where we divide that time, where we spend that time. And I think a lot of times, I know for myself, I get caught in the busyness just makes me become more busy, and I don't analyze what I'm spending my time on. I just, heap another scoop of this on and add another couple pieces of that on the plate. Yeah. And before I know it, that the plate's no longer big enough to hold all that I've added to it.
Dude, absolutely. I'm the worst at it. I'll be the first to admit. That's why I give my wife access to my Google Calendar because I'm the person that if you ask me for 5 minutes, I'm going to say yes 9 times out of 10. And more often it's going to be one of the 9 times. So for me, I have to use a Google Calendar. I have to write it down. Even like for this, we talked about it a couple of days ago, and I'm like, okay, I got to put this in my Google Calendar because if I don't, someone else is going to ask me for my 5 o'clock hour, and I'm going to be like, sure, I have nothing going on. So I tend to try to stack. And so for me, it's a calendar. It's map it out, and not just work-related things, but things that like I put, and I label them like secret code words that only I know. So that way, if someone else looks at my calendar, they're like almost confused by it. Like 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., I label that every day as pizza time because I enjoy pizza. And but that's really my prayer. That's my God time. Even if it doesn't happen exactly between 8 and 9, I at least calendar it every single day. So that way, it's a reminder. Time with like a date night with my wife or time with my wife. That's a Tuesday thing. I know it's in my calendar every Tuesday. And it's a certain color, like color-coded. That way I know, like, that's untouched. Like, if I color it this, nothing overlaps that. Nothing takes away from that unless we've already agreed for some reason that day doesn't work out. So for me, it's a calendar. Like, that's one of the tech things that I find necessary is I connect to that so that way I can disconnect from things that aren't important.
Oh, that's great. So let me ask you this before we finish up here, because I want to honor your time. If these guys, you gave 3 very specific items about how to evaluate where we're spending our time, but if you could give the advice to the guys watching this morning, what do you think that one thing is, that the most important thing to really take that first step towards being good stewards over time and treating time as the finite resource that it really is?
Yeah, I think it's a 2-part answer that is connected, if that makes sense, and I'll explain. I think it's one, it's being okay with knowing that you don't always have to be busy. I think we kind of live in a culture and a society that encourages it. Like, oh man, you gotta flex your hustle muscle. You gotta be on the next, crazy diet and like run hard and run fast and leave yourself, hung up wet or whatever. You know what I mean? Just the different, like, it's that society. It's a societal like push. Like everything's to run hard. Like the second your feet hit the floor until you sleep for 3 hours at night. You know what I mean? So The first part of that is, one, be okay with trying to find some time to do what I'm about to say. Even if it doesn't feel normal at first, it's gonna want to rub you the wrong way a little bit at first, because everything pushes you to run hard fast. So be okay with taking the time to slow down. Pastor Corey, one of the things he says a lot, which I love and it sticks with me all the time, is that new creativity, new ideas, new things happen in the margins of your brain. And if you don't have margin, you don't have area to think of where you could be putting these things or where you could be doing these things. So try to just cut out some time to slow down. Even if it's like, hey, I'm going to take 3 hours one day, I'm going to sleep for half of it, and then the next half I'm going to find something to invest my time in that doesn't mean I have to run hard. It might just mean I'm going to sit and hang out with my kids. It might just mean I'm going to sit and hang out with my wife, or whatever the case may be, something that's important. That's kind of a fill in the blank, but it really is. It's okay to slow down every once in a while, and it's okay because that's the only way you'll stop and be able to actually evaluate. So to me, if you're going to do the three things, the most important, which is to slow down and just take a breath, rest, catch a breather, and just kind of meander for a little bit. There's something good about doing it. Jesus did it all the time. Even the scripture where it said that he did it often. He often withdrew to the wilderness to pray because no one else was there. So no one else was getting his attention and talking to him. So I just want to encourage us today, man, if that's the one thing we do after this, is taking a little more time to withdraw and get away, even if it's by yourself and your Bible or journal or whatever the case it may be, just to slow things down for a little bit before you go back to the hustle and bustle. I think it'll really help us really, really accept this evaluation, on a more day-to-day level.
Well, that's great. So thank you again for spending some time with us. Thank you for investing into the not just the men of Cape Christian, but other guys that tuned in to check out Drive Time. And guys, if you want to see more from Pastor Josh, I'd invite you to tune in Facebook Live on June 20th at 9 a.m. We're going to do another virtual men's breakfast, and Pastor Josh is going to be our speaker. So if you've enjoyed this, or you just want to heckle him in the comments, make sure you tune in on June 20th at 9 a.m. on Facebook Live. Pastor Josh, thank you again for your time. And gentlemen, this is one more week to get 1% better.